Groundbreaking satellite analysis led to the conclusion that Flight 370 went down in the southern Indian Ocean. Joining us now is Chris McLaughlin. He's Senior Vice President of the British Satellite Company Inmarsat. Chris, thanks very much for joining us. So tell us, are you 100% convinced this plane, this 777, went down in the southern Indian Ocean based on your satellite analysis?
Yes, Wolf. We have looked at a number of other Malaysian Airlines 777s to look at the overall model and the best path fit with the pings that we got off the aircraft go to the southern route.
They made this announcement today. Is it really true? What's their proof? First of all, they have not been able to confirm any suspected floating objects. They simply made this announcement today, telling us that no one survived, everyone sank into the ocean. What's your proof? It's been 17 days. They simply just give us this result. How can people bear this? The Chinese government of ours should come forward and clarify and tell us. My mother, this happened on the 8th. She died on the 9th. Tell us, how do I live? I'm not done yet. All countries' governments, they are too vicious. They are too dirty. Everyone has their own ego. This society, this world is so horrible, too dirty. No government is merciful.
Ever since I found out how poorly this thing was being managed and how many changes we were surprised with as we went along. So until I actually see something, show me a piece of the wreckage, give me something I can physically identify as being the airplane, I'll feel a lot more comfortable about making a full analysis.
Outrage and fury as relatives face off with police outside the Malaysian embassy in Beijing. Over 300 Chinese friends and family members of Flight 370 protesting.
From the beginning, they just hide everything.
The Malaysian government and the Malaysian military continue putting off, holding back, and covering up the truth of the incident, as well as trying to deceive the families of passengers and people of the entire world.
As for what went on inside the cockpit of Flight 370, we have the transcript of that final communication. But what about the audio? What about the back and forth between the cockpit and the air traffic control? Well, Malaysian officials are refusing to allow the passengers' families to listen to that audio recording. Why? Because they say it's still part of the ongoing investigation.
What reason did the Malaysian government give for not allowing the families to hear the audio tape?
Wolf, they would only say that this is part of an ongoing investigation and they will not release it while it's part of that ongoing investigation. First, we heard from the Department of Civil Aviation saying that it was the co-pilot who uttered those last words and that the last words were, "All right, good night." Then we were able to see a copy of the transcript that the government finally, after 3 weeks, sent out to the media and to the families. And of course, when you look at that transcript, it said something else, something innocuous, but something else. And so it certainly is making the families wonder if they're doing this purposefully, or if they're incompetent, or if they're purposely trying to hide something. And that's what has the families so annoyed about this.
Well, there's been issues of transparency throughout this investigation, and this really underscores it. The Chinese believe that this has not been a particularly transparent investigation. Things have been withheld or reversed. They want to see it put on the table, and it should be. In any accident investigation, the facts ought to be put on the table as quickly as they are identified.
If this were an NTSB investigation, strictly a U.S. FAA NTSB investigation, you've released the transcript. Would you let the families hear the audio tape?
From the tower, of course. The tower tape would have been made public shortly after the accident. The FAA controls that, and it's their policy that unless there's some seriously extenuating circumstance, the tower tape is made public.
General, good to see you. Thank you for being with us.
Thanks for having me, Sean. I believe that, remember, they turned off, they didn't turn off communications, they turned off navigation aids. They didn't turn off their HF radio, there's VHF radio, their UHF radio. So they had the SATCOM, And so they had communications that they were listening to what was going on, and I think probably were transmitting to the location they were going to. That's why I think the U.S. vacuum cleaners, those sensors that pick up all this stuff, have probably been able to detect more than we're getting.
Okay, so there's a very good possibility that the United States knows much more than it's saying, and that we'll probably find out in the days ahead.
I think they do, and I think they want to be very cautious because they don't want to embarrass certain other nations that we're working close with, et cetera. And, but the best leaks have come out of the U.S. government.
All right. General, thank you for being with us. Appreciate it.
Well, there's a lot of ways to locate an aircraft that we haven't talked about yet, which is heat signatures that are captured by satellites all the time. There's 16 geospatial satellites, as I mentioned before, that are taking information about the emergency locating transmitter, which we haven't talked a lot about. That's not the same thing as what's coming off of the black boxes. The black boxes, I'm not sure, are going to give us a whole lot of data anyway, because of the fact that they only record data for about 2 hours of useful information, of voice speaking and things on the box. So even if that was to be recovered at this point, we know that that flight went much longer than that. So I don't think we're going to get a whole lot of information out of the black box when we do. But the other thing about the ELT is the emergency locating transmitter system is very sophisticated. It's the same one that we use for ships that are lost at sea. Emergency beacons are constantly being able to send signals if an aircraft, or excuse me, if a ship or an aircraft goes into the water. These beacons have saltwater sensing. If they're in the salt water, they go off. And there's 16 satellites constantly monitoring this. So the fact that that ELT hasn't gone off really surprises me, and that would give us obviously an exact location of where it is. So that's one thing, and the satellite temperature
what does that
sensing as well.
What does that potentially mean to you that it hasn't gone off thus far?
Well, it means to me that there wasn't, that goes off if there's a jar. Either the ELT failed, which is a possibility. In the history of the ELT, it hasn't had a good reliability rate. When it was early on, it was only a 53% reliability rate. Then it went to 83% when we went to 243 megahertz. Now we're over 400 megahertz, and the reliability has been very, very high, which is what was on board this aircraft. In fact, there were two of them on board the aircraft, one in the front and one in the tail of the aircraft. So the chance that both of those suffered an impact and didn't signal, and we can't pick that up, is very, very disturbing to me. That's a piece of information, a clue that I think gives us a lot of speculation about what might be going on there. But if we were to say that they function properly, then I would say at this point that the aircraft did not suffer a heavy impact. So that could be that it was a successful ditching attempt that occurred. But even at that, the saltwater sensing of the ELT in the water, should it have gone down, would have triggered the ELT as well.
Wow, it all only gets more fascinating and more perplexing too.
Well, it's starting to feel like it's an intentional series of distractions is what it feels like. You know, they spent a week looking in one place. Oops, that's the wrong place. And then they shifted to another because of evidence. And then that's the wrong place. So they shifted again. And at the end of this prior shift, the government was so certain that they had the right location that they made a pronouncement that the flight was down and everybody was dead. But now they've got new evidence, so apparently the old evidence wasn't correct, so they must have to withdraw that original statement because they can't be certain anymore. So now there's a new you know, it's just like a magician playing tricks on the audience.
That must be incredibly difficult for you emotionally.
It's frustrating. I think we are all being hoodwinked at this point. And, you know, if they end up coming up with real wreckage of the plane, then I'll take my words back. Because it is possible that I'm just at a frustration point that I'm no longer being rational. But it just seems ridiculous that a flight that size could have evaded all scrutiny in today's world.
Sarah, you must also know that there are so many conspiracy theories out there because the entire world wants to know what happened to this flight. Do you find yourself following every single theory, or just to get through the days, do you just focus on yourself and your process?
Actually, I don't much follow the news because it would be just an agonizing cycle. But through the website that we have launched on Facebook, it's called Finding Philip Wood. We've had a number of experts in the industry reach out to us, you know, former pilots, people with military or security types of experience. I've had access to a large number of experts through my contacts in the media, and without reservation, all of them believe that this flight has been taken, not crashed. And so I don't understand why all of the government efforts are only looking in the water. So if they're ignoring the thing right in front of their face, it must be on purpose. So I can only believe that this is just one giant distraction while something else is happening behind the scenes.
And have you raised these concerns with the Malaysian authorities, the Chinese authorities as well?
I have absolutely no contact with any authorities, Malaysian, Chinese, or up until yesterday, actually, I had no contact with the American authorities either. I mean, I'm one civilian individual. I am no expert in espionage or world politics, but I'm just using common sense, and I'm looking at the vast majority of what all people feel with common sense and intuition seems to have happened in this case, and most people feel that the governments are misleading us.
That the search for their relatives was now over, 1,046 days after it began.
Our people are still alive. Please let them go.
Give me back my daughter, another mother pleads. It was an unprecedented aerial and underwater search, costing more than $150 million and covering 120,000 square kilometers of the Indian Ocean. Most of the passengers on MH370 were Chinese. They believe a range of conspiracy theories about what happened to flight MH370, but the end of the search leaves them with few answers to their many questions.
They spent 3 years trying to find this aircraft. There's so many clues they could have followed. Now they have stopped searching.
Around 30 family members had come for a briefing by airline officials, but they refused to appear until journalists had left.
There are a mixture of emotions here: anger, bitterness, grief, and a refusal to accept that MH370 and those on board will never be found.
Thank you. The last plot, after several intermittent primary plot, there's a last plot that happened at 0215, flight level 295, 200 miles northwest of Penang. Okay, we are corroborating this, okay? Corroborating this. 0215. I'm not saying this is MH370, okay? It is, we are still corroborating this. We are still working with the experts.
So what are you saying it was?
Sorry?
You don't know what it was?
No.
So what did you see on
It's a plot. It's a plot. Unidentified plot.
The difference between secondary radar and primary radar. Secondary radar is talking to the aircraft via transponder, and it gives you the aircraft, the airline, the aircraft type, how high it flies, how fast it flies, and the ticket, so forth. But on the primary radar, it just gives a plot. It doesn't give the identification of an aircraft.
I think that answers a lot of... Going back to my earlier statement, is that they were not sure whether it was MH370.
Even more reason to go up and have a look.
They were not sure. But it behaved like a commercial airline. It behaved like a commercial airline.
We now know that at 1:28 a.m., Thai radar saw an unidentified blip along an unexpected westward track, but did nothing about it. Around the same time of morning, Vietnamese civil aviation see what they think was MH370 heading westward. 2:15 a.m., Malaysian military radar spots an unidentified blip here at Pulau Perak in the Strait of Malacca.
after several intermittent primary drop. I'm not saying this is MH370, okay?
Bound for Beijing, the flight's last known position was in an airspace midway between Malaysia and Vietnam. Malaysia Air Chief said that an aircraft was detected by military radar roughly 320 kilometers northwest of Penang in Malaysia.
Thai radar saw an unidentified blip along an unexpected westward track, but did nothing about it. Around the same time of morning, Vietnamese civil aviation see what they think was MH370 heading westward.
Investigative reporter and author Leslie Kane.
He looked out and saw some lights in the distance, and the co-pilot and the engineer saw them as well. He wasn't sure what they were, so he radioed in to ask whether there was any traffic in the area that he should know about.
Do you have any traffic? Do you have any traffic? It's a question no air traffic controller wants to hear.
And when a controller hears these magic words, "You have traffic for me," usually a cold sweat breaks out because it means he's missed something.
In 1986, John Callahan was the Federal Aviation Administration's Division Chief of Accidents and Investigations.
Pilot's asking, is there somebody out here in front of me that I should know about or you know about? He's in positive airspace, which means nobody else can fly unless air traffic approves it. The controller checks the scope real fast. He sees no traffic and he says negative.
Pilot and his crew now see two objects near their plane, only a mile out and on a collision course.
The next thing the controller says, can you see any markings on it?
Sir, if you're able to identify the type of aircraft and...
Can you tell me if it's military, if it's civilian? Can you see any numbers on it? Anything at all to identify it?
Cannot identify the aircraft, but sees navigation and strobe lights in the distance.
When a pilot encounters the unknown, and if that unknown presents a threat to that pilot, seconds count.
Dr. Todd Curtis was an aviation safety engineer for Boeing.
If that pilot reacts in a way that puts that aircraft in danger, it's a concern to all of us.
But still, Henley cannot see them on his radar. He contacts the military controllers to see if the objects appear on their more sensitive radar scope.
Yeah, could you look approximately 40 miles south of...
They pick up another object.
It looks like I'm getting a primary return.
The military controller sees a second signal, but can't confirm it's another aircraft.
I don't know if it's erroneous.
Now adjust their radar to a more sensitive setting. Suddenly, Henley can see an object flying behind.
I picked up a hit on the radar approximately 5 miles in Charlie, your 6 o'clock position. Do you concur?
Negative. 11 o'clock. 8 miles.
It's a total mystery. Reports the UFO is in front of his airplane, not behind it, as the ATC reports. Is there more than one object, or is it one object moving at incredible speed? Consider their next move. An intense light suddenly bursts right in front of them.
The light was really brilliant, and they described it as having filled the cockpit. And in fact, he described being able to feel the heat on his face, literally feel the heat physically from these objects.
Bright light fades and drops off to the left, leaving behind a pale white light. Radar still shows something not beside, but behind him.
Sir, does your traffic appear to be staying with you?
Now looks to his left and sees something that is unlike any flying object he has ever seen. He describes it as the silhouette of a giant, mysterious craft, twice the size of an aircraft carrier.
Japan Air 1628.
The frightened captain requests an altitude.
The pilot goes from 35 down to 31,000, thinking that maybe he can lose this guy in this descent. Why would this guy following me make a 360?
Right turn, 360.
They initiated the turn and looking out the window, and he didn't see the lights anymore. He didn't see the object. So he sort of breathed a sigh of relief and thought maybe it was gone. Kept going around the turn.
It's disappeared.
Continued on his way and then looked again, and lo and behold, there it was.
Mira, onto that.
Okay, and is he following him?
It looks like he is, yes.
The unidentified flying object appears to be chasing.
Sir, the military radar advises they do have a
Primary target and trail of you at this time?
The question now, is the crew in danger?
They were eyewitnesses who gave very detailed responses about what they saw. Sometimes the pilot's eyes are the only way that air traffic controller can know if there's traffic in the area.
When a pilot takes the extraordinary step of declaring a UFO sighting over the radio,
The length is unbelievable.
colleagues on the ground can often be skeptical.
Sir, if you are able to identify the type of aircraft, can you tell, is it military or civilian?
I think it's
He's having a hard time saying it's something from outer space. It's not one of ours. Never seen it before. It's not a military.
Most pilots do not report these incidents, fearful of being ridiculed and losing their jobs.
Commercial and military pilots are extremely reluctant to make a UFO report.
Nick Pope was an official UFO investigator for the UK Ministry of Defence.
This is not career enhancing. Quite the opposite. It can kill careers. Discussed extensively the issue of pilot encounters with UFOs. The message seemed clear. Danger.
Official files and recordings reveal supporting evidence of encounters between civilian aircraft and unexplained aerial phenomena.
Bottom line, stay out of the way of these things, whatever they are.
Syracuse, New York, March 12, 1977. A DC-10 carrying 200 passengers from Boston to San Francisco is flying on autopilot when it suddenly makes an unplanned 15-degree bank to the left. The autopilot is normally controlled by a compass built into the tip of the left wing. But looking out across its span, pilot Neil Daniels and his two fellow flight officers quickly realize this situation is hardly normal. They all see a UFO that Daniels later describes to be as bright as a flashbulb that appears to be towing the jet in a direction of its own choosing. The DC-10 and all aboard are at the mercy of an extraterrestrial intelligence. The passengers and flight attendants are unaware of the drama unfolding in the cockpit. For 3 terrifying minutes, the flight crew scrambles to regain control while the aircraft is being dragged toward an unknown fate. But then, just as quickly as it appeared, the UFO releases the jet and disappears into the distance behind. Daniel steers the plane back on course, and the flight continues without further incident. But the encounter will affect the pilot and crew for the rest of their lives. Daniels is warned to remain silent about the incident under threat of dismissal by the airline. He only goes public with the story after his retirement. The other members of the flight crew have refused to comment to this day. Was the Flight 94 encounter an attempted abduction? Anchorage, Alaska, November 17th, 1986. Captain Kenju Terauchi, an ex-fighter pilot with years of flying experience, and the crew of Japan Airlines Cargo Flight 1628 are en route from Paris to Narita, Japan. It's a routine flight until two UFOs appear right in front of the plane. The crew watches in shock as the two UFOs then merge with a huge walnut-shaped UFO before they disappear. In the weeks after the incident, Terauchi tells his incredible story to Japanese journalists. But the PR damage has already been done, and the airline quickly grounds him. A week later, John Callahan, then a division chief with the Federal Aviation Administration, attends a special meeting of the FBI, CIA, and the President's own scientific study team to review the Anchorage incident.
When they get done, the CIA guy standing next to me says to the people, this event never happened. We were never here. We're confiscating all this data, and you're all sworn to secrecy.
Why is the government covering up such compelling evidence? Are they afraid the general population will realize that we cannot control our own airspace?